We are recording. All right, AP class. I'm sure you guys are super thrilled to see my ugly mug again. I even got a haircut yesterday, so I would look good. I've got Sydney and Grace are listening in. So here's what you need to do. And you can pause this video and go do what you need to do. So I need you to do two things. I need you to go to Google Classrooms and go to the free exercise, freedom of expression PowerPoint. Have that up, very preferably. You will have it printed. If not, you need to be able to take notes on something because I'm going to be adding things to the slides and writing stuff down beside the slides. And I also need your 15 required cases out and ready, all right? Hold on. Okay, everybody got those two things ready to go? Okay, this is a big section. All First Amendment. Step one, free exercise. And by free exercise, I want you to write down, do not make the mistake of talking about free exercise of religion when it is a free speech case. And I don't want you to be talking about free exercise when it is freedom of expression when it is a religious case. So part of doing a free response is to go and double check your language. And you're going to see even on my slide where I got sloppy a few times on my language. So help me look for those and let's get them fixed. Hold on, I need a marker. The safe way to do this, and ladies, feel free to put this in, is where it says free exercise. If you want to be super safe, put free exercise of religion clause. That will keep you from making a mistake. All right, we've been through this. You can believe anything you want in America, but the government can infringe your religious practices if it has a compelling state interest. All right, so if a law infringes on a free exercise of religious practice, it's presumed unconstitutional. Ladies, after presumed unconstitutional, put in parentheses, strict scrutiny. Strict scrutiny. That's what this test is called. The government must prove in court that their law restricting the religious belief, restricting the religious practice is supported by compelling state interest that has been narrowly tailored to achieve the goal by the least restrictive means. By the way, this is the same analysis, the same test as freedom of expression, freedom of speech. All right, so that's why it's really easy to get confused. Okay, so what is the process on a free response question? Number one, what is the clause? So, ladies, on to the right, I put number one, clause with a question mark. Let's talk about Wisconsin versus Yoder. Wisconsin versus Yoder, if you recall, what was it, an Amish community? You don't have to remember that, you can just say a religious community. I think it was the Amish, wasn't it? Yep, the Amish and the Mennonites. You don't have to remember that. They wanted to pull their kids out of school at 14 years of age, and Wisconsin had a law that said they had to stay in school till they were 16. Remember? All right, so state law requiring all children to attend school until age 16. What's the clause? Question one, is it the state government or the federal government? If it was the federal government, you would say the free exercise clause. Because it is state government, you're going to say what? You're going to say the 14th due process plus the free exercise through incorporation. Everybody got that? Free exercise clause through incorporation. So if it is a state, you're going to talk about two clauses: 14th Amendment due process and free exercise. So, step one, do the analysis. Has there been a religious right infringed? If the answer is yes, does the government have a compelling state interest? And if they do, have they narrowly tailored it to achieve that goal by the least restrictive means? Okay, you guys pause for a second. Ladies, you go to Yoder. Wisconsin versus Yoder. It's on page 60. Ladies, I have you back on speaker.
Alright.
And I think it's working. So I just turned my volume down. I think that's why I was getting all of the feedback.
Yeah.
All right, we're at Wisconsin v. Yoder. Here's what I sent you all out a briefing paper. I need you to brief it. But really quickly, go to page 62 at the bottom where it says the majority decision. Look at the last couple lines and you'll see there it says the requirement to send their children to school beyond the 8th grade would actually interfere with well-established and deeply held religious convictions. Has there been an infringement in Wisconsin versus Yoder? Yes, what's been infringed? Deeply held religious beliefs about educating kids at home. All right, go to page 63, to the first full paragraph that says, the court then rejected the state's arguments for overriding the parents' religious beliefs. And read that paragraph and you will see the government talks about those 2 extra years of school do not constitute a compelling state interest or a compelling government interest. All right, does everybody understand what you do when you see a free exercise of religion case? Step 1, beliefs are absolute. Step 2, practices can be infringed if the government has a compelling state interest. You're going to apply the strict scrutiny test. The government must prove a compelling state interest, narrowly tailored by least restrictive means. So, if you are writing a free response, you're going to talk about the clause at issue. You're going to talk about the test. Has there been an infringement? And then you're going to apply the strict scrutiny compelling state interest test. Boom, and you are done, 100% points. Sydney and Grace, any questions on that?
No. Not yet. Nope.
Pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that this case could be matched up with Wisconsin versus Yoder in a heartbeat. What happened? A small town in Florida had a voodoo church. And the voodoo church, they were cutting off the heads of snakes and chickens in their religious practices. The city passes an ordinance to say, hey, you can't be sacrificing animals. They sued. The church sued and said, what? This is a religious practice? You are infringing on it, and you don't have a compelling state interest. All right, ask yourselves why whether or not the government would have a compelling state interest. Think about that for a second. Here's what the Voodoo Church argued. The Voodoo Church argued, hey, you've got a dog shelter that's killing 200 stray dogs a day down the street. You've got a cattle and pig slaughtering facility 2 miles away that's killing 1,500 animals a day. We can chop the heads off of a few chickens and snakes. And the Supreme Court agreed with the Voodoo Court. So what's the test? State law or federal law? State law, 14th due process plus free exercise of religion. Has there been an infringement? Yes, this is an important part of their religious ceremonies, to sacrifice animals and their religious beliefs and practices. Was there a compelling state interest? The Supreme Court said no, killing a few chickens and snakes is not a compelling state interest when there are people killing all sorts of animals for all kinds of reasons. Another important case you might see on a multiple choice question, U.S. v. Reynolds. We talked about what polygamy is. By the way, was this state or federal? And this one was federal because Utah did not become a state until 1896. So Utah was a federal territory. The government was punishing polygamists, prosecuting them for bigamy, which is being married to 2 people at once. In the late 1800s, the answer that the Supreme Court case was yes, you could make that illegal. I find this case very interesting in light of the gay marriage case because I have a hard time seeing what compelling state interest the government would say they have in terms of restricting polygamy that wasn't discounted in Obergefell, such as the best place to raise kids is a marriage between a man and a woman, or it's, I don't know. Okay. Hey, ladies, Grace or Sydney, any questions on that?
No.
Okay, so if you saw a federal case, what would you do? What's the clause? It's going to go straight to the free exercise clause without going through the 14th Amendment due process clause, right? Is there an infringement? Is polygamy a central religious belief and practice of the, FLDS, that small sect of people? Yes. Is there a compelling state interest? I think there's a big question on that. In fact, I predict that a case will come up in the next 5 years or so challenging this. Okay, next slide. Look at me. I made a mistake. What's the mistake I made? On the top. I said freedom of speech. Look, on the AP exam, if you say freedom of speech, I think it'll be just fine. What I would do in a perfect world is I would say freedom of expression. And then I would put speech in parentheses after it. So, burn these into your brain. Free exercise of religion. Freedom of expression. One is religion, one is speech. Look at the case and think about whether it is a religious practices or a free speech case, and use the right clause or they will mark you down. Okay, there's some straightforward stuff on freedom of speech. Like the free exercise clause, it is stated in absolute terms. But the right of freedom of expression, freedom of speech, is not absolute. Rule number 1, some speech is simply not protected under the First Amendment. You have no protection, zero protection. Fighting words. Ladies, after fighting words, I'm going to say threatening somebody. Can you be arrested for saying to somebody, I'm going to go burn your house down? Yes. Fighting words, threatening. Obscenity or child pornography. Under no circumstances can you be in possession of obscene or materials or child pornography. Defamation. We're going to talk about that more in a second. Libel is written, slander is spoken. It is a false statement that injures your reputation, not protected. You have no right to defame somebody. Sedition. Riot, not protected. Okay, if speech is protected speech, what do? You apply the strict scrutiny test. And what's the strict scrutiny test? A law that restricts free speech, freedom of expression, is subject to strict scrutiny. So what are you going to do? Number one, first thing you're going to do is you're going to identify the clause. If it is the state, you're going to do the two clauses. If it's the Fed, you're going to go straight to First Amendment freedom of expression. Then you're going to say, has there been an infringement? And then you're going to apply the compelling state interest test. Which is the government has to prove that there's a compelling reason why they're restricting your speech, infringing your speech, and it is narrowly tailored to achieve the goal by least restrictive means. All right, just a note, when we get to schools, you are not going to apply the strict scrutiny test. You are not going to apply the strict scrutiny test. So,
Wait, when do you not apply it?
in schools,
Oh, okay.
and we're going to go over schools. A great question. They said, when are you going to not apply strict scrutiny? If you see a school, you're going to say, number one, your constitutional rights exist at school, but they are what? Starting with an L? Limited. And they are balanced against the school's right to avoid disruption in the school environment. If you say that, you will get the points. Okay, but an important feature of the First Amendment that exists here but does not exist in other countries, and that is you cannot punish merely the content of the message. One example is the Westboro Baptist Church, who were saying horrible things about soldiers. Thank God for dead soldiers. You can't punish that message. If that's all you're doing is punishing the message. Another example, can somebody walk down the street in America carrying a Nazi flag covered with Hitler tattoos saying, isn't it great that all the Jews were killed in World War II? Can you say that in America? Yes, you can. No matter how reprehensible, you can't punish just the message. In Germany, you would go to prison. In France, you would go to prison. In the United States, you cannot be sent to prison for that. Next slide. Oops. Oh, by the way, all of the First Amendment has been incorporated. Okay. I think the Westboro Baptist Church case is so interesting because it is a case that involves both the Free Exercise Clause and the Freedom of Expression Clause. It involves the Free Exercise Clause. Why? Well, stop. First of all, what clauses are at issue? Is this a state action by a state government or a federal action? There was a lawsuit brought in Maryland State Court where the family won money for the church inflicting emotional distress. State action. What are the clauses? It's going to be the 14th, due process, and the First Amendment, free exercise and freedom of expression. Because they were out there speaking, right? Out there protesting with signs, speaking, and they were also showing their religious beliefs, right? Let me back up for a second. The voodoo case. Free speech? No free speech. Just religious practices. Yoder, free speech? No free speech. Just religious practices. Westboro is interesting because it has both, and I could very much see it on an AP exam. All right, we've been through this. So, go through the process. What are the clauses? Was there an infringement? Well, they were sued for money. They were forced to pay money for being out and exercising their religious practices and freedom of expression. Was there a compelling state interest? Well, here is the interesting thing. The family never saw the protesters. The protesters weren't close enough to the cemetery where the family could hear them during the burial. The family went another route to avoid seeing them. My analysis would be the government, yes, does have a compelling state interest in protecting families who are burying their sons. But it is too broad, it is not narrowly tailored to have an absolute ban on them protesting. To me, this was a very weak case. If the family, if the families at the cemetery, if the church was protesting at the cemetery, could the government enforce a restriction to keep them away from the cemetery so the family could be in private? I say yes, but this was too broad. So, what would you do? You would say 14th Amendment and free exercise clause. You would say, is this infringing on a religious practice? Yes, we're protesting. Does the government have a, we're protesting our religious beliefs. Does the government have a compelling state interest? Yes, but this is too broad. An absolute ban on them protesting, too broad. Then I would go to, all right, so that's free exercise. Then I would go to freedom of expression. And then I would say an absolute ban on them protesting. Their message is a ban on the content of their message. And that you can't do. All right, ladies, any questions on that?
No.
All right, good. Next slide. Symbolic speech. This is a big one. This is a big one. Symbolic speech is when you are acting, behaving, doing something that is communicating, expressing an opinion. This is a protected form of free speech. We have a case on this. It is called Tinker. Now, Tinker is a school case, all right? The other famous case on freedom of expression is Texas versus Johnson. Now, in Texas versus Johnson, Johnson walks up to the state capitol protesting something. He puts lighter fluid on an American flag. He lights it. Up come police officers working for the state of Texas, not the FBI. Texas state police officers arrest him for violating a Texas state law that says you can't desecrate the American flag. All right, what's the clause at issue? Well, this is a state action, so you're going to do what? 14th due process and First Amendment freedom of expression that has been, and I always want you to put in the magic word starting with an I. Ladies, what's that?
Incorporation.
Yeah, that's been incorporated, right? Freedom of expression. Okay. All right. Virginia versus Black. You might see this one compared with Tinker. You might see this one Tinker. Well, let's stay with Texas v. Johnson. All right, so what's the analysis? Has there been an infringement? Well, there's been an infringement because his act of burning the flag there was a message in that. There was a political message in that. What's interesting about the flag burning case is the urban myth about what you're supposed to properly do with a flag is you're supposed to burn it respectively if it is damaged, right? You've all heard that. It's actually in Congress's statute that says that's what you're supposed to do. Congress has a law saying that's what you're supposed to do with a flag that's damaged. So the Supreme Court said, you're not punishing the burning, you are punishing the desecration. You're punishing the message behind the burning. And what's the rule? We don't punish the message, we don't punish the content of the message, no matter how reprehensible. All right? You guys at home, pause it and do your and do your analysis. All right, has there been an infringement? Yes, right? Why? Symbolic speech is a protected form of speech. And and what's the rule? We never punish the content of the message. All right, Virginia versus Black, very interesting case. Virginia had a law that made it a crime to burn a cross. I'm sorry, did I say flag? I meant to say cross. Virginia had a law that said you cannot burn a cross. A white guy, interestingly, by the name of Black, gets prosecuted under this law, and he says, burning a cross is what? It is what? It is symbolic speech. And the Supreme Court agreed. The Supreme Court said you can't just punish somebody for burning a cross. Why? It is protected speech. Symbolic speech is protected speech. And you can't punish the message no matter how reprehensible. Now, you can punish somebody if they were burning a cross with specific intent to intimidate. Remember on our slide what's not protected? Fighting words, threats. So, if Mr. Black had burned his cross across the street from a black family's house, he could be prosecuted. Mr. Black was out burning his cross out in the middle of some farm without intimidating anybody. So, another application of symbolic speech is protected speech, and you can't punish the content of the message. Really quickly, in the Vietnam, this is interesting because it compares to Tinker. There was a case where young men were prosecuted for burning their draft card. So, what would be the analysis on that? What's the clause? Federal government or state government? The federal government. The federal government was punishing draft card burners for destruction of government property. Believe it or not, that's the truth. Was there, were they speaking? Was it symbolic speech? I say yes, it was. However, the government had a compelling state interest in preventing the destruction of draft cards. Ladies, any questions on that? All right, let's go. Next slide. Okay. By the way, let's go back. How many cases have we done that are our 15 cases?